couple late entries here. Excellent. All right, you guys should see Leadership Equipping 2023. Is that correct? Beautiful thing. All right, so yeah, welcome to the Leadership Equipping 2023 January call. We're going to be doing this a little bit differently than we did last year. Last year, we did it bi-weekly. Every other week we were doing a call. It was every other Monday. I had pulled many of you in early December around what kind of cadence each of you felt was best for 2023, and sort of a mixed bag of responses. I had individuals say they would like to have this call once a month, every other week like we were doing it, or even every week. Bless your heart for those that actually wanted to do this every single week. Not that it's a bad thing, but it's a lot. And I appreciate each of you taking the time even today to be on this call, as it is part of your own development. But we also talked about whether or not we want to do it for 30 minutes, 45, hour and a half, an hour, and a mixed bag there too. So I just made the executive decision and really believed that if we honed in and made this an hour-long call, like I said, this will go a little bit over today just because there's this introduction component. But to do this once a month for 1 hour and really just hit it hard and fast, no reason why we can't get the most of these calls. And to be honest, one of the biggest things for this call has to be a measure of doing behind the things that you're learning. It cannot just be a concept. It can't just be a bunch of theories handed down. And if you actually take this call once a month and then live it out over the next 3 weeks to the next call, you're going to actually see the changes you're looking for in your leadership. So we're going to go down to one call. And even at the top of the year, I had it sort of narrowed down to certain topics I want to cover. We will kind of move away from those topics at times. That's fine. But it'll always come back to the topics that we're talking about. So once a month, 1 hour, it's not any less important because we're doing less calls. No, the living it out, the acting out what you've learned is going to be that much more important, as it should have been all along. So, all right. So the call, really, what is this call all about? Like I just mentioned, it's recognizing the need for intentional leadership development. This call is about equipping leaders at all levels to grow skills, shape attitudes and behaviors to better facilitate the leading of a location. So some of the topics we'll talk through over the course of this year, we're going to talk about quality, influence, accountability, conflict resolution, execution, growth mindset. That's actually what we'll talk about today. Vision, strategy, teamwork, credibility, operating with a risk lens, and guest experience. Now, I went back and forth about what I wanted to cover first this year. Guest experience was up there. I thought we got to land guest experience. Then I also wanted to talk about quality levels and how to sew that into everything we do. But we're going to land today on growth mindset, as I believe that is actually imperative if we're to move forward in any one of these other topics. So how to use this call to your advantage? Really engage. Don't be passive. Be active in the discussions in the presentation, okay? Engage. And then by doing so, you're going to be transformed. Allow these learnings and the truths from each of these calls to take root in you, and then act. Be intentional with putting into practice 1 to 2 items from each of these calls. Now, in a lot of ways, these all kind of work together. They kind of synergize to connect and work. As you engage, you're being transformed. And as you act, you're being transformed, right? So everything, it kind of works off each other. When you engage, you're going to ultimately be transformed by putting things into action. So get you guys kind of talking, because this is a discussion when it's all said and done. I want this to be an active call. I'm going to open up with an icebreaker, and I'm going to ask, where is the strangest place you've ever slept? Feel free to unmute the line. You can actually put it in the chat as well, whatever you would like to do. But would love to hear a few of you get bold and unmute yourself and just talk to, where's the strangest place you've ever slept?
Lance, I'm going to start off and say the strangest place I've ever slept was in the back of a U-Haul.
Back of a U-Haul. All right, all right. That had to be humid.
It really was, actually.
I'll go second. A canoe and a Boy Scout trip.
A canoe. Okay. In the water or
Yep.
on the land?
Oh, it was in the water.
Were you bordering on being shipwrecked? What happened there? How did
I
that
don't know.
happen?
I was just sleeping.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
We had to go from point A to point B. It was half a day, and I fell asleep.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
I mean,
All right.
Neil's probably the foam pit in Fairview.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyone else? Anyone else?
So I had it's funny, it was a Boy Scout trip myself. I actually got to sleep inside of a cave. And like, it gets dark at night, right? But
Sure.
it's way darker in a cave, even in the daytime. And I remember like we had cots, and they were just like normal, normal. They were so rickety and so rusty. Every time you'd move, they were also bunk beds. Every time you'd move, I don't know who went to summer camp, but like it would creak, and it feels like everybody would wake up when you moved on one of those things. But when you woke up and there was a cave around you in the morning, like that was an experience that I would love to have again, but probably with a better sleeping arrangement.
Sure. Awesome. I appreciate the share. Yeah, I've slept in parks. We had a water main break in the middle of the night at a park. I had to sleep there because we couldn't shut the back door because the water was shooting out the back door. We had to leave our door open. So effectively I had to stay there. I slept on a couch, middle of the summer. Mosquitoes were a-buzzing in the park. It was humid. It was just gross. I've slept on the bottom of a shed for like a minute. And that's a long story that I won't get into here, but it wasn't even a shed anyway, I thought it was my buddy's house. And this is when I was a teenager, late teens. And we got locked out of his house, and we ended up sleeping in a shed for like a hot minute. And it was hot, and it was rough. So yeah, won't get too much into that, but it was kind of a crazy night and a sleepless night. So I shouldn't say we slept. We attempted to sleep in this shed. So, all right. Anyone else want to share in the chat or be bold and unmute yourself? I know, Aaron, you've slept somewhere odd.
So in college, I slept on the bathroom floor, college. So that's basically the weirdest place I've slept, bathroom floor. That was it.
Hopefully no alcohol was involved in that.
No, not at all. Nope, not at all.
So strangest place you've ever slept. Yeah, that's there's who else?
Slept in the desert a bunch of times.
Really? And it gets cold in the desert, eh?
No. Yeah, no, not in Iraq.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Not in Iraq. Okay. I always forget about your military background. Okay. Interesting. Awesome. All right. Any last shares?
I'll share one.
Go
At
ahead.
my old job, we had a hallway where we called the balloon room. So new mom, sleep deprived. I'd go back there and take a nap. No, there's no cameras, so no one could find me. And they'd be radioing, Crystal, where are you? And I'm in Neverland. I'm sleeping.
Fair enough. Appreciate the share. Camden, the middle of the Amazon rainforest. Come on. Is that serious?
Well, yeah. I mean, in Peru, we went out there, and it's pretty much their buildings there are no walls. So it's just kind of a structure on top of some land. And I mean, you have a door, but it doesn't really do much. So you pretty much just have a mosquito net around you at night and animals crawling all over your room.
Wow.
I definitely had a critter eat through my backpack because I left some food in there, but yeah, it's true.
And here I thought maybe it was a rainforest cafe or something, but no, true to form.
It's
the actual rainforest.
In Peru, yeah.
Crazy. Well, I appreciate the share. Awesome. All right, so moving on, guys. Thank you for adding just your thoughts around the strangest place you've ever slept. It doesn't sound like anyone had a good night's sleep by any means. But moving on, so we're going to talk about growth mindset and what does that look like in your park. Again, we're not going to be able to cover all of what growth mindset looks like, but I think it's important that we take on a different mindset when it comes to not just building teams, but really building leaders from within. A lot of practical things that we're going to talk about here, a lot of questions thrown your way, because at the end of the day, as much as I can provide some answers, and I have some answers to provide, there's a lot of answers on this call. And sometimes the best parts of these calls, we had 15 of them last year, and they're available on YouTube. There's a cheap plug for you to go back and watch, to go back and listen. Some of the best parts of these calls has been the ads put out there by each of you, when you add your voice, when you lend your stories and where you've been and what you've been able to accomplish in your park. So that's an important part going into 2023. I want to maintain that. So growth mindset. Well, we know two things, and these are kind of the pillars in which these calls were kind of founded on. The first one is knowing is not enough. You've heard me quote this stat before. It's a stat from Gallup just a few years ago. They had pulled that 83% of business leaders recognize the need for leadership development at all levels, but only 5% do anything about it. Now, I don't have enough time and space to talk through why that chasm exists, why there is such a separation between knowing and doing, but there's obviously a major separation. It's not enough to know. And this was thousands of businesses across 100+ organizations that cited this need for leadership development, but only 5% have done anything about it. The other one is leadership on day one. In my heart of hearts, this goes back to my time well before Innovative Heights. As I was wrapping up time actually at a prior job, I was recognizing that leaders need to be reproduced across all levels of our organization. And that's before I came across the stat I just quoted. And that leaders ultimately reproduce other leaders, and that this must be done on day one, and it must be done responsibly. Quick little story. I was a director of operations for another network in the same industry, doing this thing called Sky Zone. And with that particular network as a director of operations, we were coming out of 2020, and it was a struggle, like it was for all businesses. And we had lost some general managers, and I had readopted some parks doing my day-to-day director of operations role, and getting back into helping out and facilitating more on the GM level. And one park I oversaw at a more immediate level, more intimate level, kind of being the de facto GM while doing my day job, fun times, was a park that I had opened up years prior. And one of the biggest surprises I got out of that challenging season was that something had changed with the team member in just a handful of years. Something had really changed in a park that I had opened up even a handful of years later. The team member had changed, and I was having a hard time putting my finger as to what had changed all in all. But certain things that were automatics when you would bring somebody on were not automatic. Sure, we've always had issues with bringing people in through our doors, getting them working, and ensuring that they come in dressed for success, being in dress code, right? But beyond that, we were having issues with people just showing up. We were having issues, which we still have that issue, right? We can all raise our hands. People just need to show up to their jobs. But beyond that, they were talking different. They were acting different. And so really became sort of, like I said, in my heart of hearts, a goal of mine to get to leadership development at the ground level. How do we get people to become a leader of themselves? And how do you do that on day one if they can only show up on day one, right? So we need to be intentional about that. And that is something that has to be sort of in our core ethos as an Innovative Heights group. As we develop leaders from within, it starts on day one, has to happen. And so not easy. It requires lots of intentionality, but we can get there. And even bad leaders produce leaders. They're just not that good. So more on that in a moment. So again, knowing is not enough. Leadership is on day one. Two pillars in which this conversation really started off with and continues with into this year. All right, so where are we at? Largely, we're leading primarily with a destination in mind. hey, we got to get to a good weekend. We have to get through this good weekend. We have to get sales to happen. There are certain things we're doing. Even bad leaders, like I said, can take people places. Have you ever had a bad manager, a bad leader? Many of us have learned, I know I have, many of us have learned how to be better leaders as a result of bad leadership. That's the sad part, right? I'm going to do what someone did not do before me, right? That, you know, I was given a bad hand. This was a bad leader, and I saw them as a bad leader, and I knew, well, if I ever became a leader, I wouldn't do what he or she did to me. Not a good place to be, right? And then where do we want to be? Really leading others to a destination while investing in their transformation as a person. That's a whole different thing, right? As we reproduce, looking to not just the destination, but what we're doing within getting to that destination, getting to that goal at the end, right? How do we continue to sow into people, grow them from within, and really be intentional with how we connect? And so at Park Team, just kind of throw it out there. And I know, you know, with Slick City Crew on as well, the language is a little different, and that's fine. But the general makeup, just kind of put it out there real basically is team member, lead, assistant manager, general manager. And I know there's different scales to this. We have senior assistant managers, for instance. Team member is not just a team member. It can be anything from fuel zone to court monitor to action monitor, so on and so forth. But that's really just kind of how our teams are assembled. Team member, leads, assistant managers, and general managers. I like this quote from Stephen Covey when he talks about leadership. Leadership is communicating people's worth and potential so clearly that they come to see it for themselves. It's the role that we all play as leaders. So going beyond that, I want to ask the question, and this is a perfect time for you to unmute, to add your voice. You can throw it in the chat as well. That's entirely fine. But really want to kind of talk through, what does growing look like in your park? Do you see positions and layers? For example, are all sales associates equal? What separates those who excel from those underperforming? Do your people know how they are doing day in, day out? But just a sample size from each of you. If I had everyone talking, we'd be here all day, but would love to hear from a few of you. What does growing look like at your park? And it may not be. It may just be you're just doing day in, day out, and there's no level of intention. That's fine too for now, right? But what does growing look like at your park? Do you celebrate when people move up into a lead position, for instance? One way to look at it. Is it known? Or do they just kind of stumble into the position?
Well, for Canton, we weren't doing this a little bit ago, but we started doing it. Our team knows when we're doing a great job. We now do pre-shift and post-shift sky huddles. We actually did one last night. The team loved it. I'm not sure how everybody else does theirs, but when I do mine, I ask every individual how they think their shift went. And then they always want to know how I think the shift went and how my shift went. So I always put that in there. And then, you know, obviously I go over, okay, well, this is what I saw and this is what we can improve on. But we did great. Obviously, I let them know they did great, but there's always things to improve on. And then last night we did like a little, you know how everybody put their hands in and then we, you know, have fun, fly safe. So we did that because they wanted to. So
I love it. I love it. Canton Megalodons coming on. Yeah, that's huge. If there's one takeaway from this call, and I'm sure there will be more than one, that's the hope. If you're not doing sky huddles or whatever we call them in the world of Slick City, just huddling, right? Doing those huddles at the top and the bottom of your shift. Get going on them. Get going on them. They're huge. There you can talk about growth. You can talk about the plan for the day, levels of execution, so on and so forth. It's huge. Big takeaway. Thank you, Cody. So as you guys are thinking, again, just for sake of time, I have a number of questions I'm going to throw at you, as well as just the teaching today. Be thinking, what does growth look like in your park? And is it something you're intentional about? Or do you just kind of are you just living sort of in a reactive way of doing this role of manager or leader in your park, right? So again, are you being reactive? Are you being proactive? Is there a level of intentionality around growth in the park? So want to talk about a few stats that were kind of startling to me. And first, this is from a retention report out of 2020. Now, this was actually written in early 2020 before 2020 really hit. So there's not the added noise of everybody being shut down. But this was a retention report based on 2019, essentially. And it had this to say: 27% of US employees quit their jobs in the previous year. That would have been 2018. 27%. Now, 78% left for what would have been determined as preventable reasons. More on that in a moment. And yet 75+% really left due to poor management. 75+%. Staggering statistic. 78% left for preventable reasons really chalks up to 75+% leaving due to poor management when we really hone into it. But let's talk about the preventable reasons for just a moment. Some of them listed, in fact, these were the top ones listed for the 78%, scheduling problems. Again, this is not Sky Zone. This is just general jobs out there, right? But could be Sky Zone. Desire for more positive relationships with management, a lack of growth opportunities, and then finally, dissatisfaction with compensation and or benefits. And sometimes I believe in our parks, or just in general in the work spheres that we're all a part of, we believe that's like that's the heightened reasons. That's the big reason why we don't have people want to stick around, is because of compensation. And I'm not going to say that that's not part of the overall dynamic or the conversation being had. But if you look at those first three things and we really come face to face with it, and I know that's difficult, we need to not only recognize turnover, but we need to look at the reasons and address why it's happening. And so scheduling problems, that's largely controllable unless they got the job and they didn't realize we were a nights and weekend driven kind of thing. And then we can look back to how we brought them on, onboarding, the interview before the onboarding, making sure that we were crystal clear. Desiring for more positive relationship with management. Again, it's in how it's defined. How is that positive relationship ultimately defined? And then lack of growth opportunities. We have no shortage of them, but we have to lay it out there. And that's why I asked the question earlier, are we aware of how growth is handled within the park? And is it on display? Do people know how they're growing within the park? It's a big deal. So moving on from here, guys, I'm going to ask the question. And if you're not asking this question shift to shift, day to day, you should be. Do your team members love where they work? Right there, the rubber meets the road. Do team members at your park love where they work? And if yes, how do you know? We'd love to hear from you. And if not, how are you correcting this? What are some things you're doing differently to make the change, to get them to the point where they love what they do?
So in Shelby, we have a lot of our team is like brand new, and we just onboarded a ton of new people. So what I've been doing is, reaching out their first week or even their first shift, like reaching out to them being like, hey, how was your first day? Did you enjoy it? Is there something that you would like that, I could help you with, things like that. And I've gotten a lot of like positive feedback from a lot of the new team members stating, I had a lot of fun. This is, I think, going to be a fun job for me. So I'm hoping that train will roll on, because we have right now, Stephanie and I were talking last night, like we have a really, really good team here in Shelby right now. And obviously when I came in September, we really had to build from the ground up. So we're hoping to continue to steamroll and get some really good people. And and a lot of our team, like they're turning the corner, like they're finally getting ready, helping each other out, like covering shifts if need be. So, the good communication with the new hires and, helping them out is crucial. And I really think we're on the mends and we're onward and upward here in Shelby.
Awesome. Excellent. I appreciate the share. And yeah, there's definitely a turning the corner here, and it's not overnight, as you know, but it can be seen, it can be felt. And funny enough, or oddly enough, surprisingly enough, it shows up on OSAT. It shows up in, again, there's some things you can't control when you're talking about construction and some odds and ends there, some of the friction points with the guests. But the reality is it begins to show up, if it's not already, in your SMG, because, there's one thing I know for sure, that the guest experience will never surpass the team member experience. I just know that. And so the team members that we have must be in a place of having fun at their job and enjoying what they do. Absolutely. Appreciate that. Anyone else? Do you know whether or not your team members love where they work?
Yeah, so like Aaron said, something that I prioritize is when we're hiring new people, I want to make sure that I'm checking in with them on their first shift, but also continually after that. I know that something that is really important for me in our park is I want to talk to each team member individually every single day. I want to talk to my action monitors. I want to talk to my salespeople. I want to talk to everyone that we have. And it's also important, like the people that we've had since opening, which for us is like 3 months. I want to make sure that they're still loving their job. So like these are conversations that I continually have with our people to make sure that like, is there anything I can do for them to make them love this place a little bit more, or how are they?
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. So there's intentional connecting. Excellent. Excellent. Anyone else? Do your team members love where they work? Now, go ahead.
You good? If you were gonna say it.
I think our team members here at Canton are about 50-50. We've got really motivated individuals that seem to like thrive on like the team dynamic, and some who are a little bit less enthusiastic about their jobs. And I think that can, like, you know, we can coach and we can reiterate what we need from them and what their roles are. And also I think on our management, and I'm thinking that some things that I've been seeing as a result of like this, you know, there's kind of a 50-50 thing, like just like reiterating our, like what we're okay with and what we're not okay with, to basically have just ultimate clarity as to where things stand in the park, and like what we're willing to work with them on, and other things that we're not willing to work with them on, like court safety is not something that we compromise on, but
Right.
and communicating that, but also helping them kind of enter into their own loop by asking them questions about like what do you think, you know, you're best at in the court monitor position, and what are some things that you think you can grow in at the court monitor position, rather than just setting, you know, rather than just correcting left and right, helping them be in on their own growth curve kind of a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you said a lot there. I appreciate it. Coaching, right? I heard coaching in there. You didn't call it coaching, but that's what you're doing, right? You're coaching them. There's a measure in which there are some things that are just non-negotiables. Them loving their job and having fun at their job is not tied back to lawlessness and just doing whatever you want, right? Sometimes there's a confusion there that having a fun park is a park that is somehow unsafe, or people can just do whatever they want. But no, structure is necessary, and conversation around that structure, right? And really making sure that there's the proper boundaries in place. So totally appreciate that. Madison, what do you got for me?
Okay, so what we try and do here, we try and be very like accommodating. Like I know for sure that when we do interviews, one of the first questions we ask is, are you a morning person or would you rather like to work afternoons? Because like we try to make it as comfortable as they can be. Because I mean, let's say they weren't a morning person and we start them at 8:45, they're already starting their day, not happy to come into work over it already. So that's one thing we try and do. Same thing with like communicating with everybody and figuring out who they are as individuals. A lot of people work better alone, which is something we have to kind of communicate with them. Is it a problem when you're working with somebody else? Is that the issue? Or do you think you're better with a team? So just kind of learning where everybody's the most comfortable is what's working for us.
Awesome. Goes back to that first point, scheduling issues, right? So Yeah, we know it's a night and weekend job, but we have hours available through the week as well. And yeah, just putting them in a position to be successful and being clear about that. Awesome. All right. Some really good ads, guys. Anyone else before we move on?
Along those lines, but also actually in the other aspect, we also need to recognize when somebody maybe is stuck and is not gonna go any further, and you don't want to waste time. It's like, I mean, they're just not, not the right fit, or maybe you can see that they're not even willing to progress anymore. Just, you got to move on sometimes.
Absolutely. An expression I use often, and I know we haven't been in front of each other a lot, but say a lot with my teams, coaching up versus coaching out. It requires the same mechanism. It's coaching. It looks different at the end, and the looking different ties back to what they want ultimately, right? But we coach them up or we coach them out. There you go. Right. Awesome. I appreciate the share. Well, very good. If you didn't add your voice, you can add it in the chat. Would love to hear from each and every one of you, but for sake of time, yeah, ask yourself, do my team members love where they work? And if not, what are you willing to do? What are you willing to take from this conversation today and put into action? And again, it's never overnight, but it does take you putting it into action and having a day one on the front of creating a workplace that people love. So moving on, guys, really want to kind of talk through building a team of leaders, because that's really what happens in growth mindset. When growth mindset takes off, we ultimately are building a team of leaders. And especially if we look at day one as people learning how to be a leader of themselves, learning how to self-govern, we're going to be building a team of leaders when we have a growth mindset, even if it's just them leading themselves in their day-to-day. So going with that, as I talk about many times, I talked about the destination piece. What if it was less about the destination and more about the journey? Sometimes we can be about getting from point A to point B. And a lot of times that's just what we're trying to accomplish. But really, it matters how we get there. As leaders, making the connections, Hannah mentioned that, the reaching out. Others have mentioned that whole reaching out component. Aaron mentioned reaching out. That's all about how we get there. It's not just, can you get here so we can get to the end of our weekend, the end of our day, the success that we are trying to have here. We're trying to be successful, yes, but what are we doing from shift to shift, day to day, and even in the spaces in between through home-based messaging? How do you show that you care? It matters how we get there, and it's about the journey, not always about the destination. So I'm going to ask you guys to adopt an EPIC growth mindset. EPIC is just, I wanted to have sort of an acronym to work with. I think it's easier to kind of grab hold of, but here in 2023, I really want us to adopt this EPIC growth mindset. Now, this is just sort of an acronym I put together based on just my past life, back in the day as a GM, as a regional. And what I have seen is just commonalities in teams that work well and have longevity. Teams that succession plan well, they bench report well, they build from within. And when they bring people from the outside, those individuals come into the fold and they come into what is expected of them, and they do great things. And so look at this maybe as the DNA of building a great team. But however you frame this, if you adopt an EPIC growth mindset, I truly believe in your park, you're going to see success here this year and beyond. So what are some of the steps to this? In no particular order, expectations. You've heard me talk about it before. It's all about the standards, and it really is. It's all around those standards. What are the expectations? The purpose for each and every person. What are they here for? Ultimately, what are they doing, right? Giving them the map to what they're here for and how they can best help us out, and really providing some purpose for their life as well. Influence. It's really about ownership and empowerment. How do they own their role within the business, and how do we empower them? How do we equip them? How do we set them up for success every day? And then connection. And again, this is in no particular order, but already many of you who have had successful parks and have successful parks presently have talked about the connection piece, linking the job to the individual. Because let's just be honest, there's a job to be done. There's the job and there's the person. The job is skills and duties and tasks associated with said job, and then the person, right? attitudes and behaviors and personality traits and who they are, right? And we're trying to bring them together, and that's the connection piece. So we're talking about adopting an epic growth mindset. So first step, and again, I say first step, but it's just really the first piece to the puzzle, is really drawing out clear expectations. Also known as setting standards. It's imperative that expectations are communicated across all levels of a park team. Expectations around delivering on a safe, clean, and fun park. Standards and the results of not setting standards can be catastrophic. Depending on what expectations are not being communicated and held, could be a loss of team morale, unsafe park, high turnover, and even terrible guest experiences. Okay, so that is really setting clear expectations. And you've heard me say this before, I'll say it again. I've quoted this: if you walk past a fallen standard, that becomes the new standard. Now, I always say if a leader walks past a fallen standard, that becomes a new standard. But truly, it's anyone, because if we're all leading in some capacity, whether in a small way or a bigger way, if we walk past that fallen standard, that becomes the new standard. So I'm going to throw this question your way. How do you communicate the expectations in your park? Is it a pre-shift, post-shift huddle? Our SMG, results posted on your break room walls. But what are some ways that you communicate the expectations in your park? Would love to hear from you.
We post the SMG updates every Monday, or all the results every single Monday. So they see them. They get a lot of times I'll put a little blip if they, I'm seeing something really good or I'm seeing something that's concerning. I actually have been asking questions like, what are you guys seeing in this, etc. And it's also, there's a lot of the don't walk past the fallen standard, because by golly, it is easy to walk past the fallen standard, but then it becomes the standard. And so even if there's a lot of moment by moment stuff, like the moment I see it, and I'm working with the team in this, the management team on down, which they're getting pretty darn good at it too. The moment they see it, they address it. And it's addressed, and it's usually communicated to each of us. Hey, I saw this. And then if it's something small or just, it sometimes gets communicated then in our little WhatsApp chat too, just to further hit. Because if one person's doing it, there's a chance others are doing it. There really, really is. But there's also talking about it with the huddles, talking about it at the beginning of the shift. And we aren't 100% on our post shift, but we're definitely getting better with that and talking about it then when those are happening too.
Awesome. Awesome. One other individual. How do you communicate the expectations in your park? By the way, that could look like a corrective action. That every bit looks like coaching conversations every day, right? Not saying lead with corrective actions, but that's part of it, right? Correcting behaviors. How do you communicate the expectations in your park?
I think for us, the biggest thing is starting it off with our onboarding. We kind of just set it in stone, like super clear, or just like, hey, here's our expectations. If you like it, now is kind of the time where it's it's your first day. This is what we expect. If you don't like it, then it's not too late to turn around and not want the job, I guess. So we have a full binder of kind of our expectations, the do's and don'ts of what we expect in the park in terms of phones, food, beverages. You have to have a water bottle. You can't have just soda cups, stuff like that. Just standard things. And we just lay it out on the very first day as an onboarding thing. And then we also go over the respect training that day as well, just to kind of set it out clear, and then continue to follow up and make our continue to follow up and check in on them. And if they're not doing what's expected, say, hey, here we are. What can we do better? Let's figure it out.
Awesome. What a textbook response. I appreciate that. You can almost hear the mic dropping. Beautiful. Absolutely. Totally needed. Thank you. So yes, communicating the expectations in your park, it's a huge step to take, but it's one that's absolutely necessary. So I love the standard, and why I talk about the standard. I know Stephanie said that fallen standard can be so easy to step over, step beyond, and then before you realize it, right, things have shifted in a way that you don't want it to. But what I love about the standard, and I was mentioning this to a GM the other day, it was actually a week or two ago, reflecting about the standards and maintaining them and upholding them ultimately. The standard does not change to your style. We can all agree that not a single one of us on the call. Now, there are some leaders that are more alike than others, but our management styles or our managing styles, our leading styles are going to be different, and that's okay. You know, I have 5 GMs under my leadership, and none of them are the same. They're not the same, and that's okay. That's actually great. I really appreciate that about my team that I work with. But most importantly is that the style piece does not necessarily impact the standard component. Standards, it doesn't matter. The standard is the standard, and it doesn't react necessarily to the style of leadership or management. It just is the standard. Now, I will say some standards can be upheld a little bit better based on the management style, the leadership style, but that's why you're on this call, to learn how to lead differently or better in some cases, but the standard does not change to your style, which means it's immovable. It just is. That's the standard in any area of the business. So the next piece, guys, is establishing purpose. Giving purpose to your team can be a game changer, and it truly can be. Instinctively, all team members want to make an impact. They want to know how their job connects to their life. This is not always clear to them. Establishing purpose is a win-win. It speaks to the mission of running a safe, clean, and fun park, but also to every team member that works at a park. When Devin's been on these calls before, I remember him talking about individuals that would come through the doors, right? We all have high school and college age team members. Yes, of course we do. He always likes to try to position how the job at Sky Zone that they're doing, whether they're a sophomore in high school or a sophomore in college, how that can impact where they're heading, whether they want to be working for NASA or working at a hospital or wherever it is they want to work. He always tries to establish with them what you're going to learn here and how it's going to tie into where they're heading ultimately. That's something I've done historically, just sort of a natural bend that I would have in connecting with my teams, was getting to know them better. And that's one way I could get to know them. So again, I can't stress enough how important it is to establish purpose and to help them see that for what it is. So here's the question for you. How much time does it take for a new employee to feel like part of the team? This is part of that purpose piece. How do they know that they're part of something bigger than themselves? Does it take a week? Is it day one? Or is it longer? Just be truthful about it. You can add it to the chat, or you can be bold and unmute yourself, but I'd love to hear from all of you in one way or the other, because you should have a knee-jerk response to this. How long does it take for a new employee to feel like they're part of the team? And truth be told, you might be saying, well, I don't really feel like we have much of a team here.
I feel like it depends on the team member, the employee. I mean, we have some here in Shelby that, I mean, we have people that are friends of friends that, you know, and they know people. So, I mean, that sort of helps. And then sometimes, you know, there's brand new people that don't know anyone, and then they get to know people. The thing I like about the high school age, and like, everybody gets to meet people and people become friends here. So I really like that aspect, that, like, you know, team members become friends with team members. So I guess it really just depends on the team member and how they feel and if they feel welcomed and everything. But I feel like here in Shelby, everybody's a very welcoming and opening, you know, a very good team. So
yeah, they just like automatically like just pull people in and welcome them. It's part of the culture here. And
Yeah.
It kind of just has been since we opened.
Agreed.
Culture. Love it. Love it. Who else? How much time does it take for a new employee to feel like part of the team? I think you're on point there, Aaron. Yeah, it does depend a lot on the individual. Just the same, right? What are we doing intentionally from within to create sort of a welcoming dynamic? You're part of something bigger than just the job of court monitor, for instance. Anyone do anything creative, fun?
You just talk to them every day. I mean, all you gotta do is walk up to them, ask them how their soccer game went. How was your band concert? You know, just things like that. Just knowing your employees. That's what I've always done in the past. So it seems to
Yep.
work a lot and makes it create like family and that you actually care about them. I still do it today too. Not as much as I used to, just because it's so many parks and so many names to remember. But
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
get pretty close to it.
Yeah. Makes sense. I'm with you on that one. You and I have the same background, right? It's you're ground level, you're a little bit more immersed in that. It's hard to do that from afar or even when you're not afar. It's just a lot of people coming through our doors. Absolutely. Awesome. So
I
be
know we
thinking
already-
about it. How much time? Go ahead.
I know we already spoke, but one thing that I really push for is when we have a new employee, have like introducing them to like everybody we pass. Absolutely
Huge.
introducing them, kind of getting the names, getting them acclimated with everybody. It is huge. Like it makes a big difference instead of them just feeling like they have to figure it out themselves. Because if they're a withdrawn person, they're not going to do it.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. And maybe you're on this call and you are struggling in your park with people feeling like they're actually part of something called a team. There are some very simple things you can do, and they've been mentioned, right? Just making the connection with them, getting to know them as an individual, kind of bringing them around, doing the welcoming committee component, right? Giving them a show of the park and having them meet and greet with people, huge. The buddy system, right? Having them buddy up and kind of doing that from day one. That's very helpful too. It's all part of that onboarding process when and where we're able to. And I know onboarding does shift a little bit depending on the park, depending on staffing levels, depending on a lot of things. But again, how much time does it take for a new employee to feel like part of the team? It's going to be a little different per individual based on even what Aaron said, right? I mean, that's totally on point. However, there are some things we can do intention with a level of intention and really make a difference. So moving on to proper influence and yeah, going beyond Facebook likes. That's not the influence I'm talking about here. Influence is going to really house a number of things. So it's a really important piece of the puzzle. It requires an individual to recognize where they have been placed, their sphere. We talked a lot about sphere last year. We'll talk about it a lot this year, right? Your sphere of influence, how to communicate within their sphere to make impact, to take ultimately to take ownership. When a team member recognizes their influence, they begin to speak, hear, and act differently. This is something I would love to see take off in our parks, is that as we go into this year, really the individuals, our team members' speech centers are changed. I can tell you this, I'm in parks and sometimes I'm standing from afar and I hear certain things coming out of our team members and I just go, that's just not okay. That's not okay for Sky Zone. That's just not okay for the workplace. And I will step in almost always, unless I'm pulled away or I'm on the phone call or something, but then I'll present it to the manager as an issue. Our people don't understand all the influence they have in the business. They don't understand always just how they can speak into the business and really do a lot of damage. As leader of self, they need to really understand the parameters in which they've been placed and where they've been placed. And so we've talked about boundaries. We've talked about the sphere in which they're in and how to communicate that and make the most impact. Part of this is empowerment, how they're empowered to make a change. It's ownership. It's taking the ownership and saying, okay, for my shift, I'm going to run the best shift. And I know how to do that actually. And I know what it looks like. Often we have individuals who can never become great within our organization because they already think they are. And as leaders, we haven't stepped it up in such a way to say, hey, you're not all that great. It's not going all that well. And that's on us as leaders if we're not going to say anything, if we're not going to speak into it and we just let it go, guess what? We can't make them great if they already think they are. That takes a measure of coaching. That takes us really honing in on each person who has influence in our business. So again, if I could have anything from these calls, we're going to see our team members start to speak and hear and act differently. No, not robots. That's not what we're looking for. We are looking for them to have a measured response to the level of responsibility that they've been given to really influence every shift, every day. And I believe we can get there. I know we can get there. So, question for you. What are some practical ways to give ownership away in your park? These can be very simple things, but how do you give some ownership away? How do you do this? I'll take one from Hannah. Sorry, Hannah, but I love someone overseeing the glow shirts in your park, for crying out loud. That's a little bit of ownership, a little bit in little area of accountability, but it's a measured way, right? You can give them a little something and see what they do with it, and then you can give them more down the road. So what are some practical ways you can give ownership away in your park?
It was funny. I was just gonna say the same thing that you said about Hannah. I think it was like months ago, but it stuck with me. It's still, I still remember what she said. Me and you also talked the other day, writing out things that, hey, this is what I want done by the end of the week. Well, that's just with managers, with my managers, whether it be you do it or you have somebody else delegate it, but ultimately you own this and I want it done by the end of the week. So
yeah, it's good. Real simple. Real simple. What are some practical ways you give away ownership in your park?
Well, Lance, in Madison, we've like a little bit ago before Seville left, we started like our little mini manager program where essentially we've chosen like 4 or 5 people and just gave them like specific areas of the park that they handle. So whether that's one person, like that's Court Supreme, one person that's Fuel Zone specifically, one person that's sales, one person that's party specifically. But what we've been doing is we've just been sending them out into the areas and we've been telling them, hey, this is your area. You can do what you want in this area. But if I just need something done, I'm going to come to you first before I go to the team member. And so to speak, same way we do communication, even if that's a support monitor, we go through them first and then they report back to us. So it's just the little things that empower them that kind of give them a sense of ownership in specific areas that also set them up for future areas that they could possibly cover too as well. And thus moving them up and giving them more responsibility in the park is just something we've been trying to do moving forward.
Yeah, no, that's a great share. It warms my heart because that goes back to, that predates like LEAD program as we know it. That was sort of the genesis of a LEAD program. Was we had court monitor leads, sales associate leads, back in the day, cashiering, front end like leads essentially, Fuel Zone for sure. And so you had definitely parties. We had event assistants is what we used to call them. So they were overseeing the party process, and so they had their area, their world. But as we cross-trained, which is also something we need to be doing and we should be doing, we know that in that cross-training, you're always going to have individuals who become more specialized in areas and really just love said area, and they're good at it, right? Because, well, their passion is met with their purpose, and they get to do that every day in their business. So yeah, love that share. It's a really good way to look at it. Giving them an area of ownership. Awesome. All right. So some great takeaways, guys. If you didn't have anything to offer here, hopefully you're taking some notes, because some really good practical ways to give ownership away in your park. And maybe you're not there right now with your park. Maybe the little you do give away, you can't trust them with. Maybe that's just where your park is at. And that's fine. Be honest about where you're at. But ultimately, we want to get to the point of being able to give away some ownership and lead people each day to really take that on for themselves and for us. So Healthy Connections kind of wraps us up here. And again, the word is connection, but I want to just say healthy connections. Deep, wide, intentional connections are essential, like a root system underground that allows a tree to grow. Understanding of boundaries are key to truly mastering this area of transformation for your park team. Can't stress it enough. The healthy connections, really looking at things with a purpose, connecting individuals to that. It's a big deal. Michael mentioned that. I know all of my teams, especially those that I was directly over. I'd like to think that, the terminology is like, what's your secret sauce? That for the longest time would have been what I would have said was the secret sauce to a successful park, was having a connection that takes them beyond just being automatons, cogs in the machine, getting us from point A to point B, but really what's happening in that boat that's drifting across the ocean. What kind of conversation are happening? And if it's a canoe, Michael's sleeping in it. But no, going across the ocean, going across that river, whatever it may be, on that journey, what kind of conversations are being had? What ways are you connecting? And really that goes a long way. So healthy connections, super important. And so Clint Pulver is a writer, writes a lot on leadership, and he had this to say about connection. Connection is the link that forms when people experience consistent, high level of trust, love, empathy, kindness, and care. And yes, all that can be found within the workplace. It truly can. So really important to look at connection that way. This is another way he kind of lays out connection and really how standards connect or link up with connection, right? So I was actually mentioning this to a park manager just the other day. One of the challenges we all inherently have, and maybe it's hard to put, maybe you have had a hard time kind of discerning what that difficulty is. Well, I think it's this. If you're experiencing this at all, raise your hand. I'm sure you are, because I know I've had in the past. It's trying to run a park or a team in this case at a high standard while having high connection with them. And so Clint Pulver kind of writes it out that there's high standards and there's low connection is one of 4 possible ways to look at things. And so someone who has high standards and a low connection, they can have a Milton approach to the business. They can have a Milton approach to managing. And so you'll get to the destination no matter what. Hey, we're just going to get there, right? Shut up, just let's get there. It often reduces people to assets. And people kind of fall off, but that's okay. In their world, that particular manager, that type of leader who has high standards but low to no connection, they're okay with it because they have a process and they just get people to fit into that process, whether they like it, they love it, doesn't matter. They'll get to where they're going. And most often, everybody's miserable for it, even the person driving that whole thing through. The other way to look at it is low standards, high connection. This could be seen as, I think he words it as the buddy manager. Someone who's just your buddy. Nice guy, nice gal. May or may never even get to the destination. If destination is achieved though, we'll be at a lower than expected production quality, right? This is like driving around your block without having, or driving around a block without the address and just having conversation and wasting gas. Right? You're just driving around, you're having a great conversation, but you're not really getting anywhere. Yeah, you know an awful lot about each other, but you're not getting to your destination. And if you do, you get there way late. Low standards, low connections, the other way to look at it. It's apathy towards the job, towards the cause, no real sense of direction, let alone destination. Lots of fallout, turnover. There's really no connection, and there's really no standards. You open the doors, you step in, you make sure a light turns on, music's going, maybe. Low standards, low connection. That can't be anybody on this call. But again, low standards, low connection is an option on here. High standards, high connection, and obviously this is optimum. This is what we want. Destinations met with high levels of purposeful and impactful activity that infuses each individual with purpose and superior levels of production. So this is how standards and connection kind of come together. And it is a challenge to drive high standards, but drive a high connection. I want to get to know you. I want you to like me. I want to like you. But ultimately, we have a job to do. And that can be challenging at times. So if you were to ask yourself today, what quadrant best reflects you and your leadership, your managing? Are you a high standards, low connection? Perhaps you're low standards, high connection, or somewhere in between. And yes, there can be a middle standard and a middle connection. That's fine too. But if you were to be so bold, 1 or 2 of you, love to hear from you. And I know this gets personal. There's a measure of vulnerability here. What quadrant best reflects the way you're currently managing?
It can depend on the day. It really can. Overall, I go between, I think I'm most apt to be in high standards. Like I wouldn't say it's low connection because I'm always trying to make connection, but high standards, mid connection, because I've got something to do and sometimes I can be very, very laser focused on it. And that can cause lack of connection. And so, but sometimes when I go into high connection, I know I can be very chatty and get kind of stuck in that chatty mode, and that can cause the standards to fall.
Yeah.
So that's just being honest. And I would say I'm more in the high standards, low connection, but I know that at times when I sometimes do fall into the low standards, high connection.
Yeah,
And
we're
then-
a fun business and we work with some incredible people. So that can be challenging to maybe not see the standards all the way through, but have this great connection and then feel like you're getting somewhere like, oh yeah, and maybe you are, you're getting to know them better, but then standards are dropping, expectations are coming down. But no, I appreciate your honesty and going first. I do appreciate that because that's not easy. Yeah. And we all fall in this. This is challenging for sure. Anyone else want to give a stab at it?
I know for me, especially throughout the weekdays, specifically when we're slower, I fall into the low standards, high connection, and I realized that about myself. I had to sit down and kind of think about my management style. But throughout the weekdays, specifically, I fall into the low standards, high connection, just because for me personally, I feel like the higher the connections, just the bigger the respect end of it. And then on that other aspect, that also bites me in the butt because then on the weekend side of things, I fall into the high standards, low connection, where it's just like, okay, I feel like I built up this amount of like respect that you have for me. Now I expect you to meet my expectations and standards in the sense that we're busy. Like, I understand you want to talk to me, we're cool, but like we're busy. We have to hit the ground running. Everything needs just to be stayed to the T. And I'm starting to realize that and like change certain things, how I interact with my team members because of those reasons.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. You hit the nail on the head in multiple areas there. Great job. Yeah, I mean, you are high connection and you realize how that can bite you in the butt, right? Having that high connection, getting to know people. And by the way, everyone connects differently. So it's not a matter of just being, and I'm not saying this is you, but not everyone's, super chatty. It doesn't have to be a matter of being super chatty, being this extrovert, right? It may not look like that at all, but it is about being intentional, about connecting, getting to know your people while also maintaining the standards. And it can be a delicate balance. The high standards, high connection is often seen as sort of a mentoring manager. Mentoring managers, they look beyond just the process or the goal at hand, the destination, but they're also mentoring along the way. So that high standards, high connection is ultimately what we're trying to strive for. And it's not easy. It's not easy. All right, time for one more person. We've heard high standards, low connection at times. We've heard low standards, high connection, right? In which you figured out that for yourself, which is awesome. One more brave soul.
I'll go. Mine
Great.
was actually the complete opposite of the last one. I feel like during the week, I am high standards, low connection, and on the weekend, I'm low standards, high connection, because during the week I know that we have so much time to get stuff done, and I'm like, all right, we will not have time to get everything that we need done on the weekend. We need to do it now and get it done great. And then on the weekend, I'm like, okay, well, I know that we're slammed. So like, I want to be able to have, like, I value interpersonal relationships. So I want to make sure that I'm keeping those interpersonal relationships strong, but also continuing like to do our job. But like, I know that there's like cleaning lacks on weekends. Like there's so many things that we lack on the weekends because we're so focused on like guest experience. But I also realize that like guest experience is like suffering when we aren't paying full attention to what we need to do on the back end.
Yeah, awesome. And I appreciate you going and just sharing that. Interesting, right? the business piece dictates a lot of that. And that's true for all of us, by the way. We're not any one person, no matter how long you've been doing this, is removed from that potential. Is that the level of the business and the way it's coming at us, and just all the nuances of the business, the variables, the call-offs, the birthday party that maybe we didn't see that we have coming through the door right now, right? There are certain measures and certain things that happen and impact the day-to-day business that, especially if it's not your natural bend. If your natural bend is not to hold high standards and that's a challenge for you, or if your natural bend is not to hold high connection and that's a challenge for you. Either way, however you look at it, at the end of the day, we need to be very aware of this. And it's nice that you're aware of that. You're aware of how the week to weekend shifts for you. And knowing that, yeah, we can't just let the business go sideways on us. And yet you love the connection piece. You love the interpersonal relationships. You understand that, and you respect the need for that in the business, for the business to be successful. So awesome. Very good. All right. So moving on from there, guys. So being an epic leader, expectations, purpose, influence, connection. It's not the only way to grow as a leader or grow a team as a result, a team of leaders. But again, you're not going to be in a bad place if you hold high expectation standards, lead with a purpose and give them a purpose, show them where they influence, what's their sphere of authority, what's their sphere of influence, right? And also just the connection piece, making sure to get to know them and get to know them day in and day out. So what is one takeaway from this call that you can put into action? Add it to the chat if you don't want to unmute yourself, but I'd love to hear from each and every one of you. What is one takeaway? There's been many that you can put into action in the next few weeks. What is one takeaway from this call that you'll put into action?
For Canton, hold on, actually give me 1 sec. Somebody else can go. Matt's talking to the team. Oh, okay, never mind. For Canton, I definitely I believe it was Madison, their park. I'm not sure who it was who said it, but they asked like, are they a morning person or afternoon person? I think I really throughout this week and possibly in the next week, I really want to get with the team and ask like, what can we do to make this job better and more fun for you? Are you a mornings person or you're an afternoon person? Like, what can we do to make this a better experience for you? So I think I definitely want to do that.
Yeah, that was Krista. That's awesome. Simple step. Many of us aren't doing that, maybe, right? Simple step. All right, what's another takeaway from this call that you'll put into action? Thank you for going, by the way. Stephanie has position, how their job at SkyZone can impact where they're heading. Absolutely. Excellent. More team bonding. Love that. Awesome. Anyone else? Not that I want to call on you guys, but anyone else? What's one takeaway from the call? Go ahead.
I think that what got me is the talking point. What does it look to like growing your park? What does the growth look to your park? I mean, really talking to your managers and seeing this perspective, each person, what they think, what they see it, when they see the need for growth, and bringing that together.
Absolutely, absolutely, huge. It's huge. Absolutely. And some of these takeaways, it doesn't have to be over the course of, it's not like the one and only, you're going to do this for the next 3 weeks, 4 weeks till the next call. It can be something that you do this week or today, and then tomorrow you pick a different one. But there's a number of takeaways. And if anything, maybe it's in the absence of not having a response to any one of the other questions. You go, I didn't really have a response to that, whether my team loves what they do, or whether my people know that they're growing at the park, and how do they know that they're growing at the park? Maybe you didn't have an answer. And if you didn't have an answer, right there, you have something you can do. It's literally because you don't have an answer that you should be doing something. And if anything, reaching out to another manager, another GM, another AM that maybe vocalize what they're doing and saying, hey, I love what you said there. Can you give me a little bit more context, a little bit more to grab hold of, because I would like to see this area of growth in my park. I need to get better in this area. Awesome. All right, cool. The chat's rolling in. Thank you, guys. I think everyone started feeling the heat that I might be calling on you, so I appreciate that. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Yeah, prioritizing pre and post shift talks. Awesome. Yep. Changing management style to high connection, high standards. Woohoo! Not overnight. It never is. Checking in and making sure our staff loves their job. That's a big one. Ask the question. If you don't have an answer to that question, you probably already know the answer, right? And if you don't, ask them. They will tell you. Communicate with the staff whether the communication is bad or good, but just keep them in the loop with changes happening. Absolutely. Awesome. Giving leads an area on the weekends. If we need something from them, go check in with them in that area. Yes, leadership is reproduction. We're developing good leaders though, and it takes a level of intentionality, level of responsibility. Otherwise, yeah, we can produce leaders. They just may not be all that great. Awesome. Awesome. Well, very cool, guys. Thank you so much. Keep adding as you will. Appreciate it. So really just to summarize, having a growth mindset looks like something. 83% of businesses, what? Believe leadership and development needs to happen at all levels, but only 5% do anything about it. It's not enough to have a theory around leadership or growth mindset. It's not enough to just have a concept. It won't get you very far. It just won't. So having a growth mindset, it actually looks like something. So we talked about communicating clear expectations. Get it done. Day in, day out. Cultivating purpose. Really showing what's the purpose for why they're here. What role do they play in driving safe, clean, and fun parks each and every day? Recognizing the role of influence. What's their sphere of influence? What's the boundaries that are set there? And that's going to grow them as a leader. Forging connections, making that happen. Well, we've said a lot about it. It's super important. So you as a leader have a lot more impact on your team than you ever knew or have known before. So next call, everyone, February 20th. We'll be gathering here on Zoom, 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. We'll try to stay to the hour. I appreciate everybody jumping on the phone today or on the Zoom call. I know we went over. I did express we would just because we had some introduction stuff, but next call, February 20th. Now, please just don't fall asleep on me, whether in a canoe or in the desert. Don't fall asleep from this call to the next call because the power is in the doing. Let's become or stay in that place of 5%ers. And if you're not there, well, jump into that 5% club, right? Of doing and not just knowing, because that's where the change happens in our parks when we actually do out of what we know. All right, guys.
I think February 20th is like a day where we're open.
Is it now? Okay. Okay.
It's President's Day and it's midwinter break.
Yeah. Woo. All right, then. I should have known that, but sleepy eyes prevailed when I was pulling this together. So it TBA or TBD. February something, and it's going to be a Monday. So might be the week prior, might be the week after, but I'll get that date off to you guys. Thank you, Stephanie, for that. Would have caught it eventually. So next call, Monday in February. Fair enough? All right, everyone. Any questions? All right, guys. Thank you so much. Have a great day and look forward to talking to you guys again. Take care.
Hey, Lance. Thank you. For me and
Thank
Matt.
you.
Love the call.
Bye, guys.
Thank you, Lance.
Thank you,
Bye.
Lance.
Adios. Thank you.
Did we make any money yet today?
Thanks, Lance. I appreciate it. I was just opening the park, so sorry I was a little out of it.